Everyone hated the cowboy until he did the impossible. In a quiet and dusty corner of the western frontier, there was a small town surrounded by dry land, long roads, and endless open sky. The town was called Red Valley, and it was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, or at least thought they did. Life was simple there, but not easy. Water was scarce, work was hard, and people did not trust strangers. One evening, when the sun was slowly sinking behind the hills and painting the sky in orange and gold, a lone cowboy arrived at the edge of Red Valley. He was riding a tired brown horse that moved slowly, as if it had traveled a very long distance. The cowboy wore a faded hat that had lost its shape, and his coat was covered in dust from the road. He carried no fancy belongings, only a small bag tied to his saddle. His name was Eli Mercer. Eli did not announce himself. He did not ride into town proudly or try to get attention. He simply entered quietly, as if he was just passing through. His eyes were calm, but there was something in them that showed he had seen many long roads and difficult days. At first, no one paid much attention to him. The town was busy with its own problems. But as the days passed, people began to notice him. Eli stayed in town instead of moving on. He did not stay at the best place or ask for special treatment. He found a small, broken-down shed near the edge of town and fixed it little by little to make it livable. He spent his days doing small jobs. He helped repair broken fences around farms, carried water barrels for old people, and even helped fix a wagon wheel for a merchant without asking for payment. He worked quietly and carefully, never complaining and never asking for praise. But in Red Valley, kindness from strangers was not always trusted. Some people in town began to talk. At first, it was just small comments. They said Eli was too quiet or too distant. Others said he looked like someone who was hiding something. In a place where survival depended on trust, anything unfamiliar became a reason for doubt. Soon, small rumors began to grow. Someone said that strange things started happening after Eli arrived. A water pump broke in the East Farm. A delivery wagon arrived late. A few cattle went missing from a ranch far outside town. None of these things had anything to do with Eli, but people still started connecting his presence to every problem. Human minds often try to find patterns, even when none exist. The town began to change how they looked at him. When Eli walked through the street, conversations would suddenly stop. Shopkeepers watched him closely when he entered their stores. Some people even refused to sell him supplies unless absolutely necessary. Eli noticed all of this, but he never argued or defended himself. He simply accepted it with quiet patience. Still, he continued helping wherever he could. One morning, an old woman's water barrel broke outside her home. Without being asked, Eli fixed it using spare wood and rope he found nearby. Another time, a young boy's horse got stuck in soft ground near a field. Eli carefully helped the animal out without rushing or frightening it. He always acted calmly, as if problems were just things that needed patient solutions. But instead of changing people's minds, these actions only made them more confused. Some said he was trying too hard to appear good. Others believed he was pretending. A few even said he was doing it to hide his real intentions. Eli never spoke about his past. No one knew where he came from or why he traveled alone. That mystery made people even more suspicious. In a town that valued clear answers, Eli was an unanswered question. As time passed, Red Valley faced its own struggles. The land was becoming drier, and water was not as easy to find as before. Farmers worried about their crops, and merchants worried about their business. Stress slowly filled the town like dust in the wind. Instead of coming together, people became more frustrated. And in moments of frustration, it is easier for people to look for someone to blame than to accept uncertainty. Eli became that target. Even though he had done nothing wrong, many people started believing that misfortune followed him. They said he brought change wherever he went, and change was something they were afraid of. Some even said the land felt different since he arrived, though no one could explain how or why. Eli heard these things, but he never responded. He would simply look out toward the open desert in the evening, standing still as the wind moved through the empty land. His expression stayed calm, but deep inside, he seemed to be observing something others could not see. He was not angry. He was not afraid. He was simply aware. And while the town slowly turned its back on him, Eli Mercer continued to watch, wait, and understand the land in a way no one else in Red Valley ever bothered to do. As the days passed in Red Valley, the mood of the town slowly began to change. What once felt like a quiet place of simple living now started to feel heavy and uncertain. The dry wind carried more dust than comfort, and the sky seemed less bright than before. People worked harder, but still felt like nothing was improving. In the middle of all this, Eli Mercer remained in town. He continued his quiet life, waking up early each morning and going about small tasks without asking for attention. He repaired broken tools, helped fix fences, and sometimes worked on old wagons that others had given up on. He never asked for money beyond what was fair, and he never tried to become part of conversations where he was not welcomed. But the town's opinion of him had already begun to shift in a stronger way. At first, it was only distance. People stopped greeting him on the streets. Shop owners became more careful when he entered their stores. Conversations would pause when he walked nearby. It was not open anger yet, but it was clear that Eli was no longer seen as part of the town. Then came the blame. When small problems started happening around Red Valley, people looked for reasons. A water barrel would leak, and someone would mention Eli's arrival. A horse would go missing, and someone would whisper his name. A delivery delay, a broken tool, a failed crop section, slowly everything was being connected to him, even without proof. Eli noticed all of it. He was not blind to how people looked at him or how they avoided speaking directly to him, but he still did not react. He simply continued doing his work with the same calm attitude. There was something unusual about Eli. He did not try to defend himself, even when it would have been easy. He did not try to explain his past or argue against the rumors. Instead, he seemed more focused on the land itself, as if he was studying something that others could not see. One afternoon, while Eli was repairing a broken fence near the east field, two ranchers walked past him. They stopped a few steps away and spoke in low voices, but not low enough that Eli could not hear. "He's still here," one of them said. "Yeah," the other replied, "and things are still getting worse." They both looked at Eli for a moment, then walked away without greeting him. Eli continued his work without turning around. As the situation in town grew more tense, the leaders of Red Valley began to meet more often. They gathered in the old wooden hall at the center of town, where decisions were made. The topic of Eli Mercer came up again and again. Some said he was harmless but unlucky. Others said it was not about luck but about trust. In a town already struggling, even small doubts could grow quickly. One evening, the discussion became stronger than before. "We cannot ignore it anymore," one man said. "Ever since he came, things have not been stable." "But there is no proof," another replied. "Proof or not, people are worried," someone added, "and worry spreads faster than truth." The room fell silent for a moment. Then a suggestion was made. It was not said with anger, but with frustration. "Maybe it would be better if he left." No one immediately disagreed. That silence said more than words. Outside, Eli was not part of that meeting, but he could feel the change in the air. He had always been observant, and he understood when a place no longer felt welcoming. Still, he did not rush to leave. Instead, he continued his routine, as if waiting for something only he understood. That same week, more problems appeared in Red Valley. A section of farmland began drying faster than expected. A water pump in the west area slowed down. Even the cattle seemed restless. Fear started growing in small conversations, then spreading into larger ones. People needed answers, and when answers are not clear, blame becomes easy. Slowly, Eli became the center of that blame. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned deep red, Eli stood outside the small shed where he lived. He looked toward the distant hills. The wind was stronger than usual, and it carried a dry sound across the empty land. He had lived through enough journeys to know when something important was about to change. Inside the town, decisions were being made without him. Outside, he stood alone, watching the land as if listening to it. And deep inside Red Valley, without anyone openly saying it yet, a decision was forming. One that would soon push Eli Mercer further away from the only place he had stopped in for a reason no one else understood. The situation in Red Valley became worse as time moved forward. The land, which once gave enough to survive, now felt dry and tired. Wells were lower than before, crops were weaker, and the wind carried more dust than hope. People were no longer just worried, They were beginning to panic quietly in their own ways. And in the middle of all this, the blame on Eli Mercer became stronger than ever. The town had already made up its mind. Even without solid proof, many people believed that removing Eli would bring peace back to Red Valley. They thought that if he left, things might return to normal. Fear made them look for a simple answer to a complex problem. But the land did not change just because of a decision. One morning, the worst news spread across the town. The main water source that supplied most of Red Valley had become nearly dry. The flow that once supported farms, homes, and animals had slowed to almost nothing. It was not just a problem anymore, it was a crisis. Panic quietly spread through the streets. Farmers gathered near empty wells. Shopkeepers spoke in worried voices. Families started saving every drop of water they had. The town council called an urgent meeting, but no one had a clear solution. The maps showed no nearby river strong enough to help, and digging new wells would take too much time. Red Valley was running out of options. That same evening, while the town was filled with worry, Eli stood alone near his small shed. He could hear the distant voices of people arguing in the center of town, but he did not move toward them. Instead, he looked out toward the open desert. The wind was different that day. It moved in steady waves, as if it was pointing somewhere far away. Eli had seen dry lands before. He had traveled through places where water disappeared and hope disappeared with it. But he also knew something that most people forgot during panic. Land always leaves signs, even when it looks empty. That night, Eli made a decision. Without telling anyone, without asking permission, he prepared his horse. He packed only what he needed: a small canteen, a rope, basic tools, and a folded map that looked old and worn. Then, under the cover of fading light, he rode out of Red Valley. No one stopped him. No one even noticed at first. He traveled into the open desert where the ground became rough and uneven. The silence out there was different from the town. It was deeper, heavier, and full of space. The stars above looked closer, and the land stretched endlessly in every direction. Eli followed paths that were not clearly marked. Sometimes he stopped and looked at the ground for long moments, studying small details, dry cracks in the soil, broken stone patterns, and changes in the wind direction. He was not guessing. He was reading the land carefully, as if it was speaking in a silent language. For days he continued this journey. At times the heat was strong, at times the nights were cold, but Eli did not turn back. His focus remained steady. He moved across hills, dry riverbeds, and forgotten trails that most people would never notice. During one of the nights, he reached an area where the ground looked different. The soil was softer, and the rocks formed unusual patterns. Eli stopped there. He knelt down and touched the ground slowly. Then he looked around with quiet understanding. Something was hidden beneath the surface. He remembered old stories from travelers he had met long ago, stories about underground water paths that once flowed through this region but had been ignored for years. Most people thought they were gone forever. But Eli understood that water does not simply disappear. It changes direction, hides, and waits. The next morning, he followed that lead deeper into the desert. It was not easy. The path was unclear, and many times it felt like there was nothing ahead. But Eli trusted what he observed more than what others believed. After long searching, he found signs that confirmed his thoughts. A dry channel beneath the surface, shaped like an old river path, still carried traces of moisture. It was weak, but it was there. That was the moment Eli realized something important. Red Valley was not completely lost. It was only disconnected from something that still existed underground. He did not rush. He did not celebrate. Instead, he carefully began planning how this hidden path could be reopened or redirected. It was not a simple task. It required patience, knowledge, and perfect timing. But Eli Mercer was not someone who gave up easily. While Red Valley continued to struggle in fear and uncertainty, Eli worked alone in the silence of the desert, following a path that no one else believed existed. And deep under the dry land, something impossible was beginning to look possible again. The sun rose slowly over the wide land near Red Valley, but that morning felt different. The air was still dry, yet there was a quiet feeling in the distance, as if something was about to change. In the town, people were still living with worry. Water was low, hope was lower, and many had already accepted that hard days were coming. But far away, outside the town, Eli Mercer was still working. After days of careful searching in the desert, Eli had found the hidden signs of an old underground water path. It was weak, buried, and almost forgotten by time, but it still existed. Now the real challenge had begun, bringing it back to life in a way that could help Red Valley again. Eli did not rush. He moved step by step, using simple tools and his understanding of the land. He studied the ground, marked safe points, and planned how the water could slowly return without breaking the natural balance. It was not easy work. The heat was strong during the day, and the nights were cold and silent. But Eli stayed focused. Back in Red Valley, the situation was becoming more serious. Wells were nearly empty. People stood in long lines hoping for small amounts of water. The town council argued more often, but no one had a real solution. Some people even began preparing to leave Red Valley completely. They believed the land was finished, and they still believed Eli was part of their problems, but none of them knew what he was doing out there. One afternoon, while the town was struggling like usual, something unusual happened near the eastern edge of Red Valley. A few children playing outside noticed that the ground near an old, dry well looked slightly different. The soil was damp in one small area. At first, they thought it was nothing, but when they looked again, they saw something that made them run back into town. They said they saw water. At first, adults did not believe them. After everything that had happened, hope felt dangerous. But curiosity spread quickly, and soon a small group of people went to check. When they arrived, they saw it too, a soft, slow movement under the dry surface. It was not much, but it was real. A few drops of water were rising from the ground. Confusion spread through the group. Some thought it was just a leak from an old pipe. Others thought it was temporary. But deep inside, a small feeling of hope began to grow. At the same time, far in the desert, Eli was finishing the final part of his work. He had carefully redirected part of the underground flow, creating a safe path for water to move toward Red Valley again. It was not a miracle. It was knowledge, patience, and understanding of the land. He had worked with nature, not against it. When the system finally opened, Eli stood quietly and watched. He did not show excitement. He simply observed as the ground responded slowly. Water that had been hidden for years began to move again beneath the earth. Then he turned his horse and began the long ride back. By the time Eli reached Red Valley, the town was already in confusion. People were gathered near the eastern well where water had started to appear. The small flow had become steady. It was not a flood, but it was enough to change everything. When Eli arrived, many people saw him but did not speak immediately. The same man they had blamed, ignored, and pushed away was now standing in front of something they could not explain. A farmer stepped forward first, then another. Slowly, more people gathered around the well. They looked at Eli, then at the water, then back at him again. No one had the right words at first. Eli did not try to take credit. He did not make speeches or demand respect. He simply stood there, calm and quiet, as he always had been. One of the town elders finally spoke. His voice was low and filled with disbelief. How did this happen? Eli looked at the ground for a moment, then replied in simple words. The water was never gone. It was only blocked. The land just needed to be understood. Those words stayed silent in the air. In the following days, the water flow slowly increased. The town that once believed it was doomed now had a second chance. Farms began to recover. Animals became calmer. People started to feel something they had almost forgotten: relief. But the biggest change was not in the land. It was in the people. They began to realize how quickly they had judged Eli without knowing him. The man they once hated had been the only one trying to understand what everyone else ignored. Eli never asked for apology or praise. He continued his simple life, helping where needed, fixing what was broken, and walking through the town with the same quiet steps as before. But now, people did not turn away when they saw him. They nodded. They watched. They understood. Red Valley had learned a hard lesson. Sometimes, the person everyone misunderstands is the one who sees what no one else can. And the cowboy they once hated had done the impossible, not by fighting the land, but by listening to it, trusting it, and saving it when no one else believed it could be saved.